And with Alzheimer's disease, by the time, a person is diagnosed, one of the salient features of Alzheimer's disease is what's called glucose hypometabolism. So this plays into the type 3 diabetes, as it's been termed, that by the time you're diagnosed with the condition, your brain's ability to derive energy, to create energy from glucose, which is its primary fuel substrate, is diminished by about 50%. And the brain is a ravenous consumer of glucose. It makes up 25% of your basal metabolic rate, despite only accounting for 2 to 3% of your body's mass. So it's a ravenous consumer of energy. And so any power outage in that organ is going to lead to failure. And so by the time you're diagnosed, that's already, starkly diminished. And so, yeah, it wasn't really positive. I mean, in every doctor's office, what I experienced with my mom, I've come to call diagnose and adios. And, a physician would essentially prescribe a new drug or titrate up the dose of something that she was already on, but minimally effective, if effective at all. And by the time my mom passed in 2018, she was on 14 different pharmaceuticals. Right. And there's no physician on earth who can predict the way these 14 different drugs.
Not even two, probably not even two.
Yeah.
Certainly not 14.
Not even God knows. And so the level of toxicity, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't to say if there was that blockbuster drug that came along that I wouldn't, be first in line at that time to fill that prescription for my mom, but it's just very unlikely to be the case. In fact, there's all kinds of fraud, within the field of Alzheimer's drug research that, came out a couple of years ago, which is something that was incredibly disheartening. There was a paper, published in 2006, for example, that was completely fraudulent. Finally, actually, over the past week, in fact, they finally are pulling that paper. They're retracting the paper. But it was a paper that renewed interest or renewed, the funding pipeline for this drug target, the amyloid hypothesis of Alzheimer's disease, where, in 2006, a researcher at the University of Minnesota, basically what he did was he claimed to have identified this subtype of amyloid that was responsible for the cognitive decline, which was a big sort of the missing link, essentially, connecting this really druggable target, right? The amyloid beta plaque that accumulates in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. And drug research, he claimed to have found it in this 2006 paper, which had subsequently been referenced thousands of times in the medical literature, continued to, foment this the glut of research money, going down this amyloid hypothesis pipeline for Alzheimer's drug research, which was completely fraudulent. That paper is now finally being retracted.
God.
But it's just that's the situation, And so it was, incredibly disheartening. I did get my mom on an exercise regimen, which I thought was helpful, at the very least in terms of lifting her spirits, but I think probably played a role in slowing the progression of the disease somewhat. With a Parkinson's condition, exercise is it's important for everybody, essentially. It's important for people with Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, any form of dementia, really. But with Parkinson's disease, there seems to be really good data there. But ultimately, nothing really helped, And so it was really sad.